Welcome everyone, and thank you for listening to this Teaching Academy podcast in collaboration with ORAS, the Central Student Council of TU Delft. My name is Ted Adrichem.
Hi, my name is Annoesjka Cabo. We are both project leads at the Teaching Academy facilitation team.
Together with three guests, we are bringing you this podcast on the Central Student Council report that Clara van der Heijden, the Vice Chair of ORAS of the TU Delft Central Student Council, will introduce.
Last November, the Central Student Council Party ORAS conducted a survey at TU Delft with over 2,000 responses. The subject of the survey was online education, burden or blessing, and it mainly focused on the different experiences of students when comparing online and on-campus education. It also looked at what aspects they liked about online education and what we should try to take with us as the world falls back into old habits. What lessons can be learned from the past 2 years?
Thank you, Clara. The goal of this podcast is to let the people who are involved in education tell the tale of the report instead of only the numbers. To do so, we invited for a discussion a lecturer, an educational advisor, and a student.
Our first guest is Annoesjka Cabo.
Hi, I'm a lecturer, a mathematics lecturer, so I work at the faculty of EMCS, of which at the moment I'm also the Director of Education. And we're sitting here recording this podcast in the Teaching Lab, which is the home of the community of the Teaching Academy, of which I'm also the Academic Director. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our second guest is Marvin Soetanto.
Hello, I'm educational advisor at the Faculty of Applied Sciences, and my day-to-day tasks has to do with all kinds of educational endeavors, from long-term projects to more smaller urgent matters that has to do with example for hybrid education or just learning activities in general.
And our third guest is Clara van der Heijden.
Well, hi, I'm Clara. Normally I'm an applied physics bachelor student, but now I have a quite odd year in which I am in a Central Student Council. In the Central Student Council, I mainly focus on education and finance, and that's what I fill my days with, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you all for introducing yourselves. Let's dive straight into the discussion with the first broad question. Regarding the results of the report, was there anything that stood out for you?
Yeah, what I found striking, what I found surprising is the average grade. So from within my role, I just see all the different things we can do to improve the online education part, and obviously make compromises in the last 2 years as well. The show must go on in a sense, so you try to find the best solution within that possible time that we have. But obviously that comes with a lot of constraints, and in that sense, the average grade being around the 7 for me was relatively high, so I expected worse. So that is what I found that stood out quite a lot.
I also think it's nice, like the first time around, like nobody knew a pandemic was coming, obviously, but you guys, I was just a normal student at the time. You went with it, and I think I agree. It's still quite a high average, and I think that's something nice. But the first time around, people had to just improvise, and I think that in the future we know what is out there in technology, in what we want to use, in what teachers feel comfortable with, and I think we can expand this and use the good things about it. Something I noticed in the survey, that it's not all bad. There are things which students really like, and I think that we should hold on to this. The past 2 years weren't just a dark page in everyone's history, but we could learn something from it, and I think that's the value of this experience. We shouldn't look away. Of course, it wasn't nice, but it shouldn't be not useful.
But yeah, in that sense, even I think there was no choice than to adapt to the situation.
Yeah.
So that's one. I think it also removed a certain threshold, whether it's perceived or whether it was actually there to invest in changing up or reinventing your own course or course materials. And I think at this point, since they were forced to go with the flow as well and make sure that education could go on, if from within my role I would approach them and say, hey, can I suggest or can we collaborate on this specific innovation or education improvement within your course? And the only thing you have to do is this or that. In comparison, I think it would feel much smaller than before. You would have your
Momentum.
yeah. It is
Yeah.
keeping the momentum in there, and I think that might be really interesting moving forward. When well, obviously educational change will be continuous, so will always be there. But now I think we'll have an easier time getting lecturers on board with us.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I'm just thinking about the average grade that you mentioned. That it's a high grade. Why is it a high grade?
For me, it's I guess a statement made from my own perception. So for me, it's relatively high because I've found that I wanted to help a lot more lecturers, a lot more courses with going through this change in a sort of proper manner and with sound educational foundation. And there's only a handful of courses I could help in a sense in those. And considering that within applied sciences we have more than 400 lecturers, I think I've barely touched 5% in supporting them in this change. So in that sense, then, well, either there are a lot that went in the right direction on their own, and hats off to them then, obviously. But in that sense, from my view, it was like, oh, I want to do so much more, and I think we could have done a lot of more than we've done. So in that sense, I would say, oh, actually, we're doing all right. We're doing not that badly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe Clara has a different view.
Well,
on
you
that
have
or a
got
different sense.
would have got all your ECT, so no, that's. I'm just kidding. Well, of course, it's lower than the normal grade that you would get. But talking with all the people around me the past few months, well, maybe the past year, I have seen how much trouble some teachers take, some study advisors, some learning developers. Well, maybe not seen as a student, but seen as a central student council person. I admire to how much trouble everyone has gone to fix it all. So in that way, I think it's better. And like a 6.8, it's not that low. Although I must admit something which I noticed was that there was a lot of difference in study experience. Some students love the way some teachers now reinvented their education. And on the other hand, you also hear students who say, okay, well, I actually don't really get up-to-date education. I just was sent to College Rama and I had to fix it on my own. And I had to take every opportunity I had to come up with a better idea. So it is about average, that it's kind of great, kind of high. So I think that it's nice that there's a high average. But yeah, unfortunately, there are a few who fell out of the boat. That's not an English. That's just translated from Dutch. Who missed the train? I guess that's better. It's not getting better. Okay. Who didn't have a chance to follow this kind of education. Okay.
Annoesjka, would you like to add anything?
Yes, I remember I found it very of great value for us as lecturers to see how the students actually experienced the online teaching and the switch, and also that there were so many different ways that they were subjected to. It was different ways of teaching with all the lecturers having their own solutions. But I also was surprised by the contradiction I seem to remember that I read, that on the one hand the students really liked the flexibility of the kind of teaching. On the other hand, they were really missing coming to campus, but also they would prefer not coming to campus for the lectures. So on the one hand they were really missing live lectures on campus, and on the other hand they said it was great to be able to have them at home. So I think that's really the thing that we as lecturers also are struggling with now, how to continue. So which part of this thing that we experienced is the positive part that we can go further with without losing the connection between students, campus, and ourselves?
If I can say something about it, I don't think that looking at recorded lectures is the same thing as not going to campus. I think a lot of students just watch tongue twister, their lectures even at the university. Of course, it's sometimes more easy to watch them at home, but I do think that's also a value to them to watch, or nice if they can just have a place at the campus and just study there. But I do understand, like, you don't really visit the lectures anymore, or some people do, and you miss some connection there. But I don't think that recordings, looking at recordings, is the same thing as splitting from campus.
So you think when we would continue providing recordings or even live streams of lectures, then students could watch this at the campus, so study together, although they are not in the same. So, and then I hear a lot of my colleagues saying, "Oh, yeah, but then they are lazy, so they stay home."
Well, I do think that because of the pandemic, a lot of students bought nice work equipment for their homes, like nice chairs, nice desk, an extra monitor. So I think that's also an addition which makes it maybe more of this time to study at home than maybe even in the future, if it won't, because it wouldn't be as much needed as it was in the pandemic, buying all this new stuff. Sorry, could you repeat the question again?
Well, I was wondering if we would not then facilitate students to stay home and not come to campus, because it's 8:45 in the morning.
I think some students would choose to work later and start their recordings later. But maybe there's a reason why some students just learn better in the noon or late in the day, even in the evenings. So I think we should give those students the possibility to create their own rhythm and to study in the way that they think it's best for them. So I think that's also an added value of giving students recordings, which is not always taken into account.
Yeah, and you're talking about recordings, because what I liked during the lockdowns were the interactive live lectures that we provided for our math lectures. So and they were recorded, of course, but then the interactivity was lost, because the quiz questions that we used and so on were really real time. So I can imagine that you can record every lecture. I mean, I'm in favor of that, because not only, even when you were present at a lecture, it's nice to rewatch it later on when you didn't understand something or it went too fast, or to have this opportunity. So I think that we agree on that.
I think as well.
Yeah. So, but how then? I mean,
can I hook into that as well, and both on your comments? So first on, when you said, Clara, it has an added value. Added value is a question we ask ourselves when we collaborate with lecturers and when we improve or blend the course. We ask them, what is your added value in the course? So the interesting part going on here now is the notion that these lectures will always be part of that course in this specific manner, and whether or not we would have to facilitate students in recording it or making sure whatever the content in there was is still available afterwards. We can also ask, does the added value of lecture from you, and for example, Annoesjka, then not lies elsewhere, so that this part can indeed be on demand with their own pacing, and they have control over how that specific type of format of learning materials is acquired. And the added value from you might be that there's completely different activities or interaction with the students when you're on campus, which also ties into the other findings where they said we do see where we have the lab sessions or practical sessions, or when we interact in working groups with students, we see value on being on campus. So emphasizing on that and then making yourself a bigger part of that specific activity might also be a completely different direction that we could look into.
Yeah, I think that sounds good, because the question is not only what is my added value, because at the end that doesn't really matter. You'd also ask, what is the added value of a campus, of being on a campus, and what's the added value of meeting your peers?
Yeah, I agree. I think what Marvin mentioned was really interesting. I like that way, and I think that's something, looking back at the report, burden or blessing, we can learn from that. Those are the things we should take with us. What do we really want on campus, and what isn't really that much of a must? And to come back to you, Annoesjka, I do think that the campus is more than just a place for education. I think it would be a meeting point, a way for some smaller student associations to have a place for themselves and to talk about each other. It's also a place of interacting with your fellow peers and questioning what you have learned, or why are the things the way they are, and maybe even question the status quo about some things. I think that creates some inspiration. I think that creates a bond with your fellow students, because that's also really important. We mustn't forget about that. We have seen it a lot, obviously, in the last 2 years, how much that matters. But the campus is more than just an educational place. I really think that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So that looking into the future, I would really like that an interesting question then, how to really create these activities that attract students to come there and to learn from each other and from us, of course. And then there's also some of my colleagues who say, yes, but I am a role model. So if they see me in front of a blackboard or doing maybe an experiment, and they get a sense of what a professional will do in this. Okay, so how do you think that is going to work?
Well, I don't think all students look at it in that way. I'm so sorry, but I hope I don't disappoint. But I think students look at their lecturers as the person who can teach them the subject, the person who can help them in understanding the different questions, the different difficulties they find in their course. Because also I think that students vary very, very much between them, very much. So that came out a bit weird, but I think you understand what I mean. Even looking at applied physics, just looking back at the full lecture halls, I don't think everyone of them wants to be a researcher. There are people who want to go into politics. There are people who want to switch to econometrics. There are people who switch to aerospace engineering. There's so much difference between all students, actually. So I think it is difficult to say that there's one role model. I think, of course, there are students who will go into research, and of course, some will end as lecturers. That's how it all works. But I don't think there's one role model for every student. I think there's too much difference among students for that specific role model. I don't know how you guys think about that, but
I think it's an interesting perspective, because that means that also students might expect something completely different from their lecturers than they're actually experiencing at the moment. So I think it's very nice to hear this from students.
Do you mean what lecturers think?
Yeah, but also that they're already aware of the fact that they're learning things, of course, here, but that they are already aware of the fact that they will apply it in a completely different world, maybe in a different setting from where they're actually getting the education now. And maybe as lecturers, or maybe we should think about our profession also in that way, taking that into account. I don't know if that could help. I think connecting with students.
I think it's also, I do think that could help. Being open for another view on things, being open for maybe another motivation for students. You can use that in keeping them motivated, I think. If someone isn't interested in becoming a researcher, and all the examples is about research, I can imagine that it feels a bit more abstract than when you think, I want to do more engineering part than the applied mathematics part I learn right now. And you see that in a different way of a different example. It might be more applicable to you. It could also motivate you more.
Yeah. And I think that's also why it's one of our steps during design of a course, when we ask ourselves what kind of students will come into our course, and do they have different backgrounds? Do they have different expectations? What does authentic mean for them? And authentic in the sense that you described, Clara, in the examples of the exercises, in maybe visiting a visiting speaker from industry.
Yeah, I
So
think that could really help.
indeed, and who do you invite, and what is the scope, and how do you give a bit of freedom in choice of topics, for example, or in exploring certain interests within your course, and that will support also the students in finding the relevance for why am I doing this, why do I need to keep this in mind, and this is why it's important for me or for my future career. So that might definitely help with engagement as well.
So how about assessment? I don't remember actually what was said in the report.
Yeah, I think the statement was that it is strange that students are citing that the knowledge they have about previous subjects is actually a bit lower on a scale from much worse to much better. I think it was between much worse and worse. And that's kind of strange since the amount of ECTs scored is quite the same. So you should expect that if people say, I don't remember a lot about this, or I don't feel I have control about the specific theory, that they shouldn't be scoring the same as other years. I think that was the sentence.
I had a few ideas about this because obviously it's really striking, but I think it can have different reasons as well. So one is, for example, the assessment itself. Right? Is it aligned well enough with actually what's happening during the course? So are the course materials, learning activities, the content in general, really that much connected to the assessment for that specific course, or not that much, which meant that if you feel that you're a bit out of touch or you're not getting all of the topics, and you're losing focus a bit in that sense, it still doesn't matter because it was sort of mismatched with the final assessment or the more determining assessment type of that specific course. So that can be one of the things. The other is assuming that it is properly aligned in that sense, is that the perception does not or is not the same as the actual learning outcomes of the course. So you might feel that, wait, this goes slow, or I don't feel that this is the right way to sort of process this type of information or these learning materials. But in the end, it has been at least as effective as what we've been doing before, and hence having the same results. And the other one is quite coincidental, which I didn't thought to bring to this discussion. I was just walking outside the Teaching Academy, and I heard, or I was discussing with a colleague, and she just mentioned, I felt such a pity for them. I just became more forgiving in grading. And that's a really human reason.
Where were those lectures when I was taking my exams?
But those reasons, like, oh wait, I didn't even consider that part where you feel that, it's such a difficult time already, and I already had to give up these interesting activities, or they had to do this by only using a recorded past lecture, for example, I can imagine something like that, or I feel that I might have done it in the past as well as lecturer.
I also have some ideas about this. Of course, when everything was online, the exams were also online, and everybody switched to open book exams. And open book exams are, they're just very different from closed book exams. You have to do a lot less remembering and a lot more of like understanding some angles of the theory. And I think that the remembering part, if you study for your courses right beforehand, and afterwards you forget it, and it's okay because there's a lot less repetition, there's a lot less talking about it with your fellow students. I think it didn't stuck as much. And the other thing which comes with open book exam, that it is another way of learning. You have to learn in a different way to control the subject in a different way. And now everyone has, for example, the first year students have only learned in an open book exam way, and now they switch to closed book exams, and that's just another learning experience, and they have to switch their way of studying completely in this in a few months, and just get used to this. So I think that's also a quite that that also had quite an impact on students. So yeah.
So do you think it would be a good idea to stick with the open book exams, or for some of the courses, for instance?
To be honest, I prefer closed book exams. Not like it is about the experience you take with you after your study, and I think that closed book exams is more intact with remembering, with getting a grip on the subject than open book exams. Although it has some advantages, and in some courses it might be more applicable, but that is just dependent of the course. But I think the preference is for closed book exams. I think this is also something which came out of the report, that some people preferred exams. Most people preferred exams more online than offline, or that it scored high on what we should do offline.
I think that's quite interesting, because I think it aligns more with one of your last statements, in the sense that it's dependent on the course whether or not it makes sense to create an open book exam. So obviously, if there are learning objectives that really fit into that category, that you have to be able to just within a blink of an eye have to restate or share a definition or explain something, then obviously a closed book exam does fit that condition, fits that statement. Maybe it has to do with protocol or statement, or something that's to do with troubleshooting. That's time sensitive, urgent, and so on. That's where you have the benefit of that. If there's much more to do with insight, design, and for example lab work or anything in that category, then I think an open book exam makes the most sense. You are sort of required to know all these, what you also had to do or also had to learn for a closed book exam. And if not, you could potentially still look it up, which is fine. But if you have an open book exam which has been constructed properly, then that time loss will be detrimental to your final grade, because it's lost time on you coming up with different ways to interpret or to apply that specific knowledge or information. So I think course dependent would, for me, be the answer I would also go for.
Yeah, but I do think that like theoretical course could also be maybe more closed book, since there's a lot of, for example, for calculus, you need to learn some tricks and things, and I think that's just more closed book exam. And
unless the learning objective would be to be able to model mathematically, then you can use all these tricks to model and then explain.
Yeah, well, that
would be my goal, really.
But in a sense, then like tying into that might mean that you would construct your exam and the time available for that exam to make sure that you can model it within a given time.
Yeah.
And every time that there's a step that, part of what would traditionally part of a closed book exam, you would spend time looking it up and trying to find a definition, that it's just impossible to get that the best grade on your exam. Yeah,
that's interesting.
The students reported to like the flexibility of online education. However, in terms of ability to focus, to ask questions, understanding of topics, involvement, social interaction, campus education is considered better than online. So it's about the perception of learning and the actual learning. To what extent should we give students the autonomy to choose their own study rhythm, and should teachers accommodate students in this?
Well, I can start by saying something.
Mm-hmm.
Well, looking back at what we discussed and about how every student is different, I think that in Delft we have something really unique, like a very large student community with very, very different student and study associations and opportunities students can take to develop themselves outside of their study. And I think that's something which asks for room and flexibility in your study sometimes, if you want to take it further. So on one hand, you of course want to follow all of your lectures and all of your projects, and on the other hand, you are developing yourself. This is also an age, I feel completely like an old person saying this, but this is the age where you are trying to find out who you are, what is interesting to you, and you start your study and you meet a lot of different people, and people get enthusiastic about your ideas if you are on committing to some commissions or something, or if you want to try a board here, this is applauded because people are happy with you contributing back to the community. So, and in the meantime, you are really developing yourself. You are becoming the person you want to be, and doing this besides your studies sometimes ask for a little bit of flexibility and a little bit of puzzling. So I think that's why flexibility is something we should consider. And I think that's really valuable, because at the end of the road, we are not just trying to deliver as a university some walking replicas of the theory we are teaching, but we are trying to deliver engineers. And being an engineer with some unique skills can take you to some amazing places, and it will open some doors for you. And I think that's a real Delft engineer. Yeah, that sounds like a commercial.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
No, but I really like this. I also completely agree. So the point is, I think for some of the lecturers, that, I mean, if you have to imagine what this means, right? So practically, of course, there are some challenges here in scheduling or offering the material and also the assessment and so on. And somehow, maybe with everything that is new or different from it used to be, people tend to see only problems. So they tend to say, okay, yeah, so if autonomy means then we won't see the students anymore, as we discussed before. Okay, so because then one student will study in the evening and the other one in the morning, so they won't meet each other anymore. And how are we going to deal with that? So it's I think maybe it's the feeling of losing control, which is actually what autonomy on the other side will bring the students. I'm not saying that I agree with it. I see really a lot of possibilities here, and also I would really be interested to think about how we could really design this to happen without losing the positive things that we think are also important. But I don't have an answer. Maybe Marvin is the
No, I wish I had the answer for this already. But yeah, in what way can we support this autonomy is then indeed the biggest design question. Yeah. And it doesn't mean to, it's a bit of a spectrum. We shouldn't consider it as, okay, we don't make any of the decisions at all, whether we're educational support staff
it's not
or
binary.
lecturers. No, it's not like now you as a student, you make all the decisions in this course. Yeah. Right? No. And that might be part of an overload of information. And you don't know where to start. You don't have the right information to make those decisions or to make those assessments on an optimal way or path through this this learning experience. So what then? So there should be a middle way in where we say, okay, we advise or we provide you these specific options. Those are all equal in effect, in outcome, and within that scope, the decision is yours to make. But I think this definitely also as educational advisor, we try to base those design decisions obviously from educational sound concepts and principles. And then within that, combined with the specific learning objectives you might have within the course, we can say, okay, then let's make these 2 options, activities or paths within your course, and from there they can choose. The other way around, it's not the opposite, but in a sense, you don't necessarily lose a sense of autonomy when you can't make any decision in the course. So if you as a lecturer or me as education advisor makes a really sensible decision in this is really the only optimal path through this course, if you as a student or as a learner also agree with me, it makes 0 sense to do this first, because then I don't have the information on this. I can't even start with my lab work. I can't even do my simulation, whatever. So this is the only sensible path through it. Then we don't diminish your sense of autonomy. You just simply agree with the decision that's made. So I wouldn't do it or wouldn't want to do it in any other way.
Yeah, and I think it's also quite a lot about timing. It's just not autonomy doesn't mean I want to do the course on my way. I'm gonna reinvent everything. It's also about, okay, well, I have this deadline for some personal thing I do or a commission I do with my association, but I also have this deadline, and being able to plan both, there should be a bit of freedom in maybe, okay, well, my friend who was also in the commission can do this only in the morning, so I have to use the evening to study. And having freedom in this also gives a lot of autonomy to the student, just being able to plan your own week, instead of just like when you go to school, you arrive at 8:45 and you go to home 5:45, and that's your school day. I don't think, I already say school, but that's maybe a bit of the past in the sense that for younger people, now you are becoming an adult. You must learn to combine all the things in your life, not just your education, but also your friends, your new home, and of course, in the beginning, it's really difficult. You don't really know what's expected of you. You don't really know what it means to be part of some friend group or association. So maybe there's a bit more need to be given some instructions. But the older you get and the more experience you get, the more you are able to plan, and you know what is expected of you. So in that sense, I think that being able, getting the freedom to plan it in the way that, it's possible for you. I think possible is the right word. That's also autonomy. It doesn't always mean that you disagree with the teacher. It also means that taking your own time when you need it is that's also crucial, I think.
So this also means something on a program level. It's our curriculum or a year, right? It's not a course thing.
Yeah.
And we see that different programs have really different ideas about this. For instance, in applied science, in the first year, everything is booked, right, from 9 to 5.
Yeah.
And I know other programs where it's already very, very free.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah. But
what I'm wondering, you mentioned these interpersonal skills and these professional skills that are really being valued by students. But when we have a look at the report, you asked students of TU Delft what the university could facilitate them more in terms of learning materials, and they reported that they would like more recordings and self-assessments and short knowledge clips. But given the fact that you say all these things about those interpersonal and professional skills, why do you think, or the others, Marvin, Annoesjka, that students pick these learning facilities?
Well, I think the thing what I was talking about just now, like this is more about personal development. Skills as debating, or when I look at I'm just gonna talk about me for a second. When I look at myself, I see two parts of me becoming the person who I am today. In my study years, I have my study in applied physics, which taught me a lot. I've really worked hard to get some good grades, and no, I'm just kidding. Well, I really worked hard to pass my subjects, but I also did a lot outside of my study. I live in a house with 18 people where I had to learn to stick my head out for myself. I'm doing a year in the Central Student Council, and this is learning a lot of me. Like, I'm sitting here with some people who I wouldn't have talked ever if I just was a normal student, doing a podcast about online education. Well, this is not something a normal student would just do, or would even get the chance to do, because I'm really lucky to be in this position. That's the way how I look at it. But I'm learning really different things from both sides. I'm becoming more self-assured. I'm doing more things I would like to do outside of my study in my personal life, but also becoming. Oh, sounds so cliche. But becoming like becoming the person who I want to be. And in my study, I just study the subject I really like to do, and I do think that when I'm done with my master, I'm going to look for a job which combines both. It's not just physics for me. Even in my master's, I think I already am going to go in another way, which fits more with the direction my personal life is going. So, yeah, those things are completely different. I'm kind of averting from your question, but and what we wanted to do with the first question is, okay, now we have experienced online education for 2 years. What are the things we liked about it? What do we want to take with us? And I think it is noticeable that the things which are selected, more recordings, more info clips, and more self-assessment, are 3 things which give a student more autonomy.
Yeah, I think it links to the other finding, right? Where the positive experienced construct was the flexibility. I think those 3 also greatly relate to flexibility. And I think what you mentioned, this gives us so much insight. Not necessarily that we have to do these 3 specific things, but it's the question, in what way can we provide flexibility that we also agree with or that we also support? And it might be what we just described, the recordings or the short clips, might be that we find completely something else when we dig deeper as questions go into discussion with you, with students and with lecturers. So this will be a really interesting journey moving forward.
Thank you, Marvin. I think we are approaching the end of our podcast. I have one last question to you all. Do you have any additional thoughts that you wanted to still share?
I was thinking maybe also how do we get there? Because when we have this conversation now, you as students really collected some feedback that we can really do something with. It would also be, I think, very good to go into this future together. I mean, as in the Teaching Academy, we do have a stream which is called Student as Partners, and I think this would be really something that we would be interested together with lecturers and learning developers and students to talk about more and to get insights, and maybe also to try out some things for who does it work and in what setting and what design do we need and so on, because we can it would be I think we value this input very much.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of students who love to participate in this. You have study associations with people who are focused on education who also like to give input, and they are so close to the students. They already talk to their associations, and they already ask a lot of feedback. So I think those people are always happy to help. Faculty student councils, the central student council. Speaking for myself, of course. And I think there are a lot of students who want to help. So if you say, okay, we want this, we have this incentive as well, I think there are a lot of people standing here who would want to help as well.
And Marvin, how do you see this?
Yeah, so in our course development process, there is, it has different phases, and obviously you have the more conceptual phase in the beginning. And I think it was already a recommendation. It might be good to have a student there who has some specific insights or can contribute or might have an opposing view to us as lecturers or educational advisors. And I think for me in the last 2 years, this changed from might be a good addition, as in we need to have at least 2 students for every of those sessions. So I think that's also how we approach it on a more course design level perspective. So that's, I think, moving forward, that will not change at all. And I think we're going to spread the word as well. Maybe some colleagues are still do that on a different manner, but I will definitely recommend from the start have students also be part of the design session, development session, really as co-collaborators. So not necessarily as in, now you have the room to say something. No, when we ask about what's your vision or mission statement for this course, then as a student, you're participating on an equal level as the lecturers. Obviously, then it needs to come together and lecturers need to stand behind that, but you're really there as a co-collaborator.
Yeah, I would also say as a co-creator, because you also know more about all innovative maybe ways of communicating and so on that we are always behind. So
I really like hearing that you guys also really value the insight of students, and that it's really taken into account when creating education.
I think it's also important because we all say, okay, we don't really want to go back completely as it was before the pandemic, right? I mean, most of us say, some people say, oh, just forget about it, you go back. But okay, at least I would really like to, well, as you did, that's also what you did, a survey for what do we want to keep, right? But then the question also is how are we going to keep, and what exactly do we want to keep? And there, this conversation is really helpful.
Thank you, Annoesjka, for these great closing questions. With this food for thought, it is time to wrap up our discussion. We have touched upon several interesting topics such as autonomy and flexibility, lecturers as role models, and interpersonal development of a student. If you have any further questions about the report or other questions for the Central Student Council, make sure to reach out to them. And if you want to share or spotlight something about education yourself, make sure to reach out to us, to the TU Delft Teaching Academy. Thanks again to our guests, and thank you for listening. Until next time, bye.